Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the presentation on AAC Evaluations. Thank you all for joining in. As you are arriving in, we still have a few people joining us. I just would like for you to fill out a little poll. I want to know who's listening in today and what you do. So I see we have quite a few speech-language pathologists with us and some AT specialists. Very nice. So it looks like we are kind of split between AT and speech. And oh, we have some OTs. That's awesome. So I'm going to, while you guys continue to look at that poll and let me know who you are, hopefully you're all represented on that list. I will just tell you a little bit about myself. I am a speech-language pathologist. That's my background, and I serve as the assistive tech team lead for a school district of about 25 schools in South Carolina, and I have been working with assistive tech for a few years solely. So I did start off as a speech-language pathologist and moved to Minnesota and worked as a pediatric and adult neuro and pediatric neuro AAC therapist for a few years, and then transitioned to working with ALS patients, and I did that for a few years, and so I became the Assistive Technology Program Manager for the DC, Maryland, and Virginia chapter of the ALS Association. And so that's kind of where my background is. I have a robust background with doing AT and AAC evaluations for both pediatric patients and adult patients. And so that's just some of my experiences that I can share with you today. I look forward to talking about AAC evaluations. If you would like to contact me, my email is there, and you'll also be provided with these slides later, so you'll have that email later if you should ever want to contact me. All right, we're going to talk about what are we going to look at today. So 3 things in this presentation. We're going to be looking at some AAC evaluation myths, how to conduct effective AAC evaluations, and successful device submission reports, because we all think that those are fun to do, don't we? And a lot of work. So how can we streamline that process? So first of all, let's take a look at some myths when it comes to AAC evaluations. And hopefully none of these little slides offend, but I do have some graphics on here, and I say, what is a myth? It's something that's not factual. So there's a little slide that says lie, but if that word offends someone, I also have the word alternate fact. So that is what a myth is. All right, here we go. First one, I would like to know if you think this is a yes or no question. Should someone be able to answer a yes or no question as a prerequisite to using AAC or before they are able to have that evaluation? And I'm getting a lot of no's, and I like that. I like that. We're going to move right on to the next question. 92% of you said no. The next question, matching pictures or identifying pictures, do you think that's a prerequisite to evaluating or recommending someone to be an AAC user? And I like the responses so far. I am getting a lot of no's. About 86, 87% of you are saying no. Next question. Before using AAC, do you think a person must be able to use PECS or some type of low-tech picture symbol system before you can recommend them for an evaluation? And once again, I'm getting a lot of no's, so about 95% of you. So let's talk about our first myth, because all of those are kind of related to this myth. Our first myth is that there are prerequisites to doing AAC evaluations. That is not true. That is a myth. There are no prerequisites to doing AAC evaluations, and we're going to talk more about that as we go on throughout this presentation. Here are some things you might have heard. Someone is too young for an AAC evaluation, or, well, this person is illiterate, so there's no need to do an AAC evaluation. I've actually had professional tell me this about an adult using eye gaze. So I find that very interesting, that is still a myth that's kind of out there. You have to use low tech for a certain amount of time, for X amount of time. Many of us might have heard that. That's also a myth. Or poor cognition equals no device. So if we're limited in our cognitive skills, then there's no way we're going to get a device. So they're using that as a prerequisite for that AAC evaluation. So the answer is to all of the above. There are no preset of skills. There are no prerequisites. Symbol acquisition levels, age requirements, cognitive abilities to being able to develop AAC skills and to proceeding with an AAC evaluation. And I have included some research for you all. And I love some of this research because of the dates. This first column is talking about symbol acquisition. And this article really stressed that children with developmental disabilities and significant delays in their receptive and expressive language skills can still learn new symbol relationships when given the chance and based on how they are taught. So really, it's just a lot of modeling, which really goes to this research article there about the impact of aided language stimulation. So that's still, the best practice is to use a lot of modeling. And so that article there in 2004 research article really talks about that. So it's really about how someone is taught and less about there's a certain hierarchy to learning symbols. And this is what that second article here kind of touched on. And again, this date is from 2018, this research. Children learn to use AAC best when provided with aided AAC modeling and a narrative, which means a familiar context or routine, that type of intervention, an eclectic approach with prompt hierarchies. That's how they learn best. So again, it's lending to there not being a certain symbol acquisition level. We have to get to, PECS first or this symbol set first before proceeding with looking at AAC as a whole or looking at an evaluation or what device or tool might be best. So that is the leading research. I have several articles that we can share with you as soon as the presentation is over. I think you're all going to be able to get a copy of those articles if anyone wants to do any light reading. And I say that jokingly, but they're there for you if you want to read them. Let's go on to the next myth. High tech is the best tech. So it's kind of, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. While there isn't, we don't have to stay with low tech for a certain amount of time. So that was on this slide. This is a common myth here, that you have to use low tech for a certain amount of time. So that's one side of the coin, so that's not true. But the other side of the coin is that sometimes we rush to high tech, and that's not always the best tech for the person. And my favorite, example of this where I ran into this personally is when I was working with a patient who was using eye gaze, and again, that seemed to be the best tech at the moment for him, at the moment of the evaluation. And truly, because of some other environmental factors he had going on, such as his stamina and ability to sit upright and be able to be in his wheelchair, it was very low. So this was more of a bedridden person with some vision problems and nystagmus. So he had a resting position where his eyes were more comfortable with using eye gaze, but that position wasn't the position you would have him in for his day-to-day life and his needs. And so while we were rushing to use high tech because, eye gaze is wonderful, he really needed a low-tech option. And so we ended up blowing up a communication board, like a really giant poster size, putting it on the ceiling in his bed, and he would lay there with his mom and communicate with her with just a laser pointer on a set of glasses. So again, it's really just finding what the person needs and not about high tech. So that's a myth, that high tech is always the best tech. And it's a myth that's easy to fall into when we're doing an evaluation. Another myth is that communication only happens in the, or at the, so I'll fill that in, communication only happens in the clinic, or communication only happens at home. And so this is a pitfall for us when we're doing evaluations, because it doesn't happen in just one place. And so you have to remember to include all the environments. And even though you might not see Johnny or Susie in their home environment, but really interviewing that parent or family member and finding out more about how they communicate at home and incorporating that in your evaluation is going to help, no matter whether you see the person in a clinic or whether you're seeing the person as a student in a school. You have to include their whole environment and consider their whole environment in your evaluation to come up with a tool that's going to be effective. Another myth is that there is a magical AAC tool or device that works for everyone. Sometimes we hear about a wonderful tool and we see it advertised, or maybe another parent told this parent and the word has spread, and so everyone wants this one thing. And so that is a real danger during an evaluation, because not one tool fits everyone. And there are some really great tools out there, and that may work for multiple people and students. but because not one tool fits all, we just have to keep that in mind, and that's just a myth. All right, the evaluation is the end. A lot of people think, oh my goodness, this was such a long process, or we did an eval, we did a long, lengthy, maybe a 30-day trial, and I have to do this really long device submission report, and when I am done and it's funded, that is the end. Well, no, that's a myth as well. Evaluations are ongoing. I like to say an evaluation is a snapshot in time, because it's always the beginning. It's never just one and done. When you're doing an evaluation and that child or student or patient has come in to your clinic or to your AAC center, and you've got them for an hour, maybe you have them for 2 hours, that's a snapshot in time. So you're not going to get every bit of information you need in that short amount of time. And even after you have a tool in place, you're still going to be evaluating, because the person changes, right? Their language system or their language needs change based on environmental changes or how they're growing and developing their language, or maybe something physical changes about the person. So evaluations are always ongoing, and you do a lot of your evaluation also during the trial process. So we know that just on the day of your eval, that's not truly the end, that's the beginning. It's kind of like the work is just starting. So you have you have to use a standardized assessment tool. That's another myth. It is really your choice if you're going to use a standardized assessment tool. Just know that that you cannot use the normative data when you're working with a nonverbal student or person. The test was not normed on nonverbal people using AAC devices, so you can't use that data or report it in the same way. But you don't have to use it. You can use informal assessments. You can use maybe more than one or a few of them and kind of collectively report on your observations of the person. We're going to get into this when we talk a little bit more later about some different types of evaluations that you can use. So we went through all of these myths. So when to recommend AC? When are we just ready to go? And so it is going to depend on the person. It's not a black and white answer. Many people want a black and white answer. And there just isn't. But I like to look at how are they communicating and what kind of communicator is the person that I'm working with. So we know that there are 3 types of communicators. There's emergent, there's they have a limited understanding of symbols and how they represent ideas. There's context dependent. They understand picture symbols and photographs that represent a common object or action or person. And I like to think of context dependent as, if I navigate on their tool for them and get them to the page or to the subject that we're talking about, and then they can answer. They need help sometimes with the context, but after that they are able to respond. Sometimes I put that in my mind under context dependent as well. Independent, is someone who can use a combination of communication tools across a variety of settings with many different communication partners, including same-age peers. So when you are thinking that someone is ready for an AAC evaluation, more than likely they might be at that emergent level because it's probably a person that has never used AAC before or is just newly introduced to it. So what I look for is emergent communication or communicative abilities. What are they doing? How are they already showing you that they want to communicate or that they are communicating with you? So if they're having a temper tantrum over something, that is a form of communication. They are letting you know, and the only way they know how, that something is upsetting them or that they're wrong or that they want something. What if it's a person who's very medically, or a child who's very medically complex, and so it's not a person who's dragging you to something or pointing at something? It's really easy to determine if someone is ready for that AAC evaluation if they are dragging you to something or pointing you, and you say, wow, this child or this student or client, they're ready to communicate because they're showing me nonverbally with gestures what they want. But when you have someone who's medically complex and they maybe don't have the ability to do that, what are you looking for? So you're looking for responses to stimuli. You're looking for, do they follow you with their eyes? Is there a change in their expression when someone enters the room that is familiar, or when someone leaves, or to a certain sound or object of interest? So you're looking for kind of that spark, and so that's what I look for. And when I see that spark, no matter what their age is or what they've been exposed to, I delve in, because what you don't want is for that spark to dim because someone has told you you have to wait a few years before you can proceed with an AAC evaluation or with an AAC evaluation, or you have to spend a certain length of time on picture symbols and PECs and that kind of thing before we can move on to anything else. So by the time you do that, and then the child is a few years later, you've lost some of that window of opportunity to capitalize on that initial spark that they had. And that's been my experience. So we're going to move on and talk about AAC evaluation tools. Now, standardized tests, again, when you're reporting on this, you have to be careful how you report. If you are using a standardized test with normative data, you have to say, that you modified this test to accommodate the nonverbal person or the AAC user. I have used different tests out there to give you more information. I know that we said one of the myths is that you don't have to have, there's a prerequisite for AAC. So someone being able to answer yes, no, or someone being able to match or identify pictures, that is not a prerequisite to develop AAC skills. However, that is good information to obtain to find out more about how they understand the world. That's fine. And you can do that with a standardized test, but just be careful on how you report those results. And you can use, I think I read once in an article, I thought it was a very good point, that you can use, if you adapt or modify that test in the same exact way every time you give it to the person, then you can use it to compare them against themselves. So like if you used it 1 year and you're going to kind of do a follow-up the next year, you can compare, how they did previously. So I love to do lots of observations and tools that are like kind of a screener oriented, something that kind of tells me how I'm going to move them forward. And so two that I have found are the AAC Evaluation Genie that I love, and also the AAC Goals Grid. And you can find that Goals Grid within the free app Pathways for Core First. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. The best tool, no matter what you're using, is going to be your SET framework. And we're going to talk about that as well. And so that's where you're evaluating the student or person, the environment, the task, and the tool. So let's delve into these tools. And when you're looking for a tool, you want to find a tool that will allow you to evaluate the whole person, something that helps you kind of streamline your process with your documentation, and tools that are easily accessible and, if necessary, easily adaptable if it's something that you have to adapt. So the SET framework. And then I've included the website here. So on Joy Zabala's website, you can get the SET paperwork with, I know this has, my sample here is all filled in, but she does have blank forms there that you can download. So you're looking at the students or the person, their environment, the task, and the tool. And if you're looking at all of that, then you are really looking at the whole person. And environment, remember, can be where are they communicating. So within the school, it's not just in the classroom. It's in the cafeteria or at recess or in specials. You also want to include how they're communicating at home or in the clinic. So all of these places together in the community. So you're looking at the whole environment and what's needed. The task, when you're doing an AAC evaluation in school, you do need to find out what they need to be communicating most, or what is the most challenging things that are happening within the classroom in which AAC might help, especially when you're working with someone who's using AAC because they have limited verbal skills or limited intelligibility. So they're really using it to augment what they say. It might not be the only thing that they're using for communication. You really want then to really break down the task and what it is, where is their trouble. So how can you streamline that? Because if you do look at her paperwork, it is a lot of paperwork, and it's the SET framework. I love it. I use it, but I do have to streamline it sometimes to make it work for me. And one way I found to do that is to incorporate it into my referral process. So when we created a Google format, a Google form for our referrals when we went digital a few years ago, we designed the form, the Google form, to incorporate that SET process, that line of thinking. So when a teacher or an IEP team member fills out the AT referral form, we're already asking in that form about the environment, about the task. What is it that you're trying to have the student do, or what's most challenging for them? And then we're already asking about the tools, all within that referral form. So when that referral comes back to me, it's streamlined my process because I'm able to look at everything, the comments that were made, and kind of already kind of have a set process going or paperwork going for me because they've written down or they've filled out on the form what tools they've been using already and what has been successful and what hasn't been successful. So that kind of gets me going, and it's kind of like a jump start to that set framework. Now this tool is old, and I've been using it for a while. I got it from Closing the Gap when I went to a AAC Tech Connect presentation. I loved it, and this is just the front of it, but it just has a good way of looking at the whole person. And I no longer fill this form out, but I just like it because just to think about it, once you do this a few times, you're kind of always in that frame of mind of looking at the whole person. So if you're new to AAC Evaluations, having a tool like this might be helpful because it's reminding you to do. It's reminding you to look at the whole person. But once you do a few of these, you really won't need to fill out a sheet like this. So I'm going to respond to a couple of questions before I move on. So one question is a copy of the AT referral form that I was just referring to with Google. I can send that form out, but I think what you would have to do is you would have to make a copy of it. If you, I think you would have to make a copy of it and save it to your Google Drive. So if you have Google or Google Drive, I certainly can send that to you. If you want to put your email, I'm not sure how
Rachell,
I would do that to you, but
if you want to send that to me, Rachell, I can include it in the post-webinar email.
Okay. All right, we will do that. So we'll get you a copy of that. All right, and the next question, or another question that was asked was about cortical blindness and the use of eye trackers. That is a very good question, and I do some eye gaze presentations, and I have done some for AbleNet in the past. When I am evaluating someone who's complex, medically complex, and they're going to be using an eye tracker, with vision, eye trackers have come a long way, and I do not rule someone out if they have cortical vision impairment or even some types of glasses that were inaccessible to eye gaze in the past has changed as they come out with new trackers. So I do not rule anyone out at first. What I do is I try, you need to try more than one eye tracker. Don't try just one. And I do try different, I like to record. There's Toby Donavox has a gaze viewer option where you can actually see the heat map of where they're looking. And so an evaluation like that, before you delve into the language side and what language system you want, you do need an evaluation that's going to show you where they're looking at on the screen. And so really what you're doing is you're doing it in eval that's going to tell you how this person is looking. Because with various eye disorders out there, you don't know every nuance to their eyes and what they're looking at on the screen. So I'd be happy to discuss that more with you later. And if you want to use my email and ask me specifically about eye gaze evaluations, please do. Okay, so The next question is a copy of this form. I will get it to AbleNet for you guys to go out right after the conference is over. So someone is asking, can they have a copy of this AAC Tech Connect form from that's looking at the whole person and different features? Yes, I can. And I will just say one caveat about it. There is a front and back to this form, or it might be a 3-page form, and you'll see the age. So the front of it, I think, is really relevant. The second page, you might see the age if it's referring to a certain tool, because apps have progressed since this form came out. Okay, so another tool that helps streamline. This one is AAC Eval to Go by Smarty Ears apps, and if you have never used it, it just allows you to generate a report. And we have a little video just to show you how that works. I think.
Okay, today we're going to take a look at the AAC Eval to Go. You can see that you can customize your screen to say what you want it to. At the very top and kind of grayed out, I have the school district that I work for. There are boxes available for you to put in observations and assessments. I love that there's a camera here and a microphone so that you can record. So that is a nice feature. And I also like that you're kind of able to create your own bank. Available technology, they do have some that come in this bank, but this is completely customizable, or you can edit it to kind of say what you have on hand, or you can add something new if you're in the moment and forgot to add a tool. You also can do the same thing for the recommended strategies, and it just kind of goes through every area that you might be doing your assessment on. So this tool is simple, and it's nice if you just have a lot and you want to be able to design the look and feel of your own report, and maybe design something that is really easy for you to just kind of tap a button and say, this is the tools I'm looking at. It's really easy to set this up in that set framework, looking at the student, the environment, the tasks, and the tools, because it kind of flows in that manner already. And then with the ability to edit these kind of word bank or drop-down bank menu options, it's easy to set it up that way. The downside, again, as I've mentioned, it's just completely customizable, so it's kind of blank. And if you don't want to have to start from scratch and build your own tool, then this isn't the app for you.
Okay, so that was a little bit more about that tool. One of the questions that came through was, do I have a library of devices that we use for evaluation? Yes. So, and what we do is we have a loan closet for our school district in which we do keep devices for evaluation. We do not have everything, of course. One way to get more devices in your personal library is to utilize the device companies that are out there. The one way is to get a product placement. Sometimes companies have a product placement program. So if you are at a school or a hospital or a clinic and you find that you are doing a lot of AAC evaluations, you can approach your local rep for a certain company or approach them all and say, you know, if we had a product placement, you know, we could get your device, you know, in there as part of our eval process quicker or more frequently. You know, pick your words carefully and see if you can increase your library that way. Another thing that you can do is companies such as AbleNet, they have a loan closet themselves, or it's a program that in which you can get a loaner device or a loaner kit. And I have used AbleNet's program myself, and it worked quite nicely. It was a very easy process. So when you're working with a tech company, check out their website, see if they have a loaner program and for how long you can get something on loan. Another way to help you with those evaluations is to use your state assistive tech program. Every state has one. They function in very different ways. Some programs want you to come into their center, but a lot of them have a loan closet into which they will loan you something for a set amount of time. In this state that I live in, which is South Carolina, they loan for a 2-week period. And what we do in the schools is we will purchase for our own loan closet, but when it comes to something that is really super expensive, we will see if the state AT program has it. We will borrow it for the 2 weeks and then do a trial and then determine if we are going to get it for our loan closet or for a particular student. So that's how that works. So there's just some ways that you can that can help you out during evaluation. Okay, and so the next question that came through was about purchasing a device for school district. We're going to get to more of funding questions, or we're going to talk about that. So let's see if we can get through some more slides. So another software that I like to use during my assessment process, sometimes as a screener, sometimes as part of an eval, is the Evaluation Genie by Hump Software. It is an app for iOS. It is accessible. It is very easy to use. There's a guide if you're looking it up online, which I do include this in the resources list. And I had a video to show you, but I think it's quite long, so I'm going to skip that video, and I'm just going to say that when I talked about, you know, being able to gather more information about how to match pictures or maybe their ability to identify nouns or categories, that's good information to have. It's not a prerequisite, but it's good information to have, and this particular app is an easy way to gather that. But even though it's quite robust, it's and I'm going to turn on the video and maybe show you just the very end if I am able to forward. I'm not sure.
Today we're going to look at 2 of the subtests
I might not be able to forward this.
Genie. I've turned all the other ones off except for the.
Sorry, guys. So when you're doing this type of evaluation, at the end there's a data form, and I'll see if it's at the very top. If you're looking on the screen, there's a magnifying glass and it says data. So this particular app gives you a lot of data afterwards, and it kind of tells you more about how many buttons they can handle on the screen. It doesn't take that data. That's something that if I were the OT doing this with a speech-language pathologist, as the OT, I would be looking at the child's range of motion on the screen and maybe how many things can they visually scan while speech is gathering kind of the language data. So I like that app. If you haven't seen it, it's fairly inexpensive, and I think it's less than $20. Maybe it's $12. so it's fairly inexpensive to check out. AAC Goals Grid is super easy to use, and it's a free app within the Pathways for Core First app. What I like about this is it's made by Tobii Dynavox, but you do not need to be using a Tobii Dynavox device to use this Goals Grid, so that's nice. And so I will show you that video.
So one great tool is found within the Pathways for Core First app. And even though you might not be using Snap plus Core First as a communication software app or tool, this companion app that's free is really a great AAC tool for developing skills. And because it uses the Goals Grid, and you can use that no matter what tool you're using. It just, as pictured here, takes you through emergent, that's that light green level, emergent, transitional, context dependent, transitional independent, and independent. So on this probe or grid or tool, there are 113 skills to becoming an independent communicator. Again, no matter what tool you're using. And I find that this tool is just so easy to use. When we're looking at language, operation of the device, social language with the device, strategic skills, so how are they problem solving, using their device to problem solve communication breakdowns, or, and I say device, but it could be any AAC tool, because again, I can take someone who is not yet using a high-tech device, and maybe they're using something lower tech, and still apply this, most aspects of this tool to them. What I like about it is that it updates the score in real time. Something like this is helpful to me when you want to show progress over time, and so I kind of like to use this in the initial eval, but I also like to kind of update this annually and just see how they're progressing to becoming a more independent communicator. So if I just take a peek here at the emergent level, when you check off something, it says that it's met, and if you see on the right at the top, kind of under the X, there is a score that's automatically updated. When you leave it blank or you check that you're working on it, there is no change to your score. That just means they don't have that skill yet. And what I love about it is that it offers some lesson plans. So in my next session, one of the tools I will feature is how to use this app in your treatment plan, and how you can kind of use this as an extra tool or resource, and what's actually featured in some of those lessons. So we'll just briefly touch on that next week for those of you who are interested in seeing that presentation.
Okay, so that was a little bit more about that particular app, and I love using it because it's so robust, and again, really works well no matter what type of AAC tool I'm using for communication. And you're going to find out a lot about what the person is doing and how to progress them along those levels. Okay, so someone asked a question about the AAC Eval to-go app and how much it costs. It was $42, so that is a little pricey. So again, it's really going to come down to whether you want to make your own template or you want to use their guide to making a template. Okay, so evaluations and the funding report. Before you start, you're really going to have to get a very good medical history. A lot of funding sources want that information. So make sure that history you have is complete. I'm sorry, we only have about 10 minutes and a lot of funding stuff to get through, so I'm going to breeze through this. I'm not going to read all the information on the slides. I'm just going to try and give you the main point. Know the rules of your funding source. Remember that a funding source and a DME provider are two separate entities, so that's really important to know. The durable medical equipment provider is like the device company. Your funding sources or your Medicaid and Medicare is your private insurance. What's important to know is that funding source usually has a requirement of things that are needed. And so I've listed some of these things here, and they'll be on your copies of the slide. I'm going to go on. When it comes to Medicaid, it's different in every state, and I hope this will answer the question we have about funding a student's device. Just know that if a student or child or a person has Medicaid, it's going to be different in each state. The requirement might require a certain time period for a trial, and it may not, depending on the state that you live in. Certain data requirements might be required depending on the state that you live in. Sometimes letter of medical necessity is needed up front, and some funding sources only ask for that if they are a particular kind, like a managed Medicaid plan. Sometimes it matters who signs the report when it's Medicaid. So if it's a team effort, they want the whole team to sign. It just depends on the state that you live in. So really get to know your guidelines. Medicare and private insurance, what's important to note is private insurance generally follows the Medicare guidelines. Medicare review is a regional process, so know the rules of your region. And for example, some regions, if you're creating your own template of report writing, they don't want you to use drop-downs. Sometimes a region might define a trial period, or a certain managed Medicare plan might have a definition of a trial period. Standardized versus non-standardized testing, and this goes for Medicaid as well. Even if they have a particular form they want you to use, and on that form it says, report your standardized testing data, you do not have to give a standardized test. You can state why that person was unable to complete it, and it's because you have to modify it, so it's not, the data is not accurate as far as the norm reference. So as long as you're really giving a description of what you did do to test the person, that usually suffices. Whenever you're doing a Medicare, Medicaid, whatever type of funding report you're doing, be sure to mention that the communication impairment is severe. Give a detailed description of that impairment and how it impacts them. That's going to help you get approved quicker. And they want to know the prognosis. Are they stable? Are they declining? You know, what is the prognosis for the foreseeable future? You're going to have to give that comprehensive assessment, but if you did note that something is different about their hearing or vision, you also have to note how is that going to affect them with using the device. So yes, they have cortical vision impairment, but what did you do during your trial to make that device accessible for them? So you changed everything to high contrast symbols, well then you need to put that in your report. With the modification of this, the patient or the student possesses a physical ability to use this SEG and the required accessories to communicate. This is an example. In your funding report, you have to have a rationale for choosing that device. If you try more than one device, you have to state why you ruled something out. You can rule something out if you didn't try it, if you had a reason why you weren't trying this particular tool. You can rule something out with or without trying it for most funding sources, but you have to tell why you did that. So as long as you can explain yourself effectively and consistently, and there's no contradiction in your report, you should be fine. Okay, remember that if you're using something like an eye gaze, that is actually an accessory. It is not part of the device. So when you're writing it, you can't write it as it's one thing. You have to write for the communication device and the accessory. Same as amount. Amount is an accessory. And so that's what this slide kind of says. You have to list and give a rationale for each accessory that you're doing. And so to answer the question that was asked about having a student with working with students to help their families with their insurance on purchasing a device, we do that in our school district as part of the AT process. We do help families do that. We encourage them, if they already are seeing a medical provider and their medical provider is willing, we kind of team up with that provider to help. But most of the time, they are asking the school to do that. So as long as you have documented it in the IEP as a communication tool or device, but not naming it, as long as you have an alternate way of accessing communication as a backup method listed in the IEP, and there should be no liability on your part for the school to AT team to help write that report and get it funded. You can proceed. So you would follow whatever channel you normally would, whatever durable medical equipment provider that you were using to turn in that funding report. And that DME provider should know more about funding sources in your area. So whether that child's insurance will accept or not, you should ask the durable medical equipment provider before proceeding, because it's kind of to see before you spend time doing that report. And what I find since I do a lot of these reports is I do need my own template. So I have collected my own templates based on my report writing and different disorders. So I'll have a CP template or an autism template or an eye gaze template. So that helps me streamline things. The main thing to remember when report writing, I say these are my brick tips for dynamic AAC report writing. You need to be repetitive and descriptive. You need to, so if they need a certain device or tool and it is the best device or tool for them to use, repeat that in your report, that this is the most effective way for them to communicate. Rule out other devices and accessories. Don't just pick one and rule nothing else out. You have to rule things out. Be informative. Make sure your writing is informative. Make sure that you're not writing something that is going to, sway someone in another way, that you're informing them exactly why the person needs what they need. Check behind yourself. Avoid contradictory statements. Know the report writing rules of your funding source. And don't forget your treatment plan. That's the most important part. So it should have a long-term and a short-term goal. Please don't forget your treatment plan. That's the most important part of the funding report, because it's your agreement saying this is what we're going to work on once this device has been funded. So I gave you some tips there. Thank you all for joining in. Sorry that the funding part was kind of rushed, but I do give a webinar on this for AbleNet, and I think there might be one, an old one that was previously recorded just on funding. Please email me your funding questions if I didn't touch on something that you had a question about. And also, I hope you can join me next week, because we're going to talk about what to do after the device is funded, because it's only just begun, guys. Thank you. And I'll stick around if anyone has any more questions. I see there's one hand raised.
If you do have a question, you'll want to enter it into the chat box.
Okay, is there a guideline for referral to treatment time regarding AAC? I have not seen a guideline for research. A lot of medical funding will actually have a guideline for trial time. So, and sometimes DME providers will have a guideline for trial time, like they'll only lend you something for 30 days. So referral to treatment, I haven't seen a guideline. For me, it's kind of referral, then I'm actually trying the tools, and then I'm implementing them. So it's kind of trial implementation, kind of hand in hand, and then I'm moving forward. If it's something that's medically funded, of course it's going to take a while to implement it, because after the trial is over, they don't have it for a while. So that's a really good question. But in my research, I haven't seen it, and in my practice, I would like to see referral to guideline happen, with referral to time of using it happen fairly quickly. In the best case scenario, it would be less, 30, 60 days, but we know that doesn't happen. Could you repeat why the AT evaluation to go may not be needed? That might not be needed because if you have your own templates already for writing up your AT evaluation, you might not want it. If you are good at designing your own template and you just want to design your own and not have a guideline for designing one, then you might not want it. But other than that, it is a good tool if you just want something streamlined so that all your evaluations look the same. I really would not use it for medical funding. I would use the AT Eval to go just for like a school-based team to streamline those reports. Okay, can switches be considered accessories also? Yes, but know the rules of your funding source. Sometimes funding sources will not let you use a switch and an eye gaze and fund both. So you want to know the rules of your funding source. If they say you can't fund both, you definitely want to write your report for the eye gaze, because that's the most expensive, and figure out another way of getting the person the switch they need to operate it. So that's just an example. Emergent people, is that okay to prescribe high-tech before low-tech? If they are emergent and can react very well when you're modeling and with that language stimulation, then yes, you can. Low-tech is great to always have, especially as a backup, and if you want to start there, that's great. But if you did not start there, I just think of so many, even babies, young children today, they're on their little devices, and they're, so young. You don't have to start. If they can interact with it and are responding well to stimuli and to that modeling, that language and aided simulation, go ahead, go for it. Does insurance cover tablets with eye gaze, pick eye attachment? I was told not. Okay, so I don't know what your abbreviation stands for, and I don't want to assume. Now, insurance does cover certain tablets, and it's all in how the company has presented it. So, like, for instance, AbleNet has a tablet, and forgive me, Deb can correct me on the name of it.
It's the Quick Talker Freestyle. The Quick Talker Freestyle is an iPad-based device.
Yes, so AbleNet has an iPad-based device, and so you can check with them on funding and what sources fund it. And then I know, like, another example is like Tobii Dynavox has a speech pad. So as far as an eye gaze attachment to it, no. I have not heard that anything like that for a tablet-based device is funded. Now, if you're looking for just a smaller device for eye gaze, there are different options out there. If your client is just looking for something small and not bulky, I'd be happy to respond to you in an email about that if you want to, when you get the documents, if you want to email me. Okay, does the client need to be able to communicate medical needs with the device to receive approval from medical insurance? That is a very important thing to document. Yes. Do they need to be able to do it like 100% of the time? No. What you will have to stress in your report is that without this tool, they would be unable to communicate their medical needs or their wants and needs with a caregiver or with a medical provider. So you don't have to say that they have to be 100% at communicating with the doctor, but you do have to say that without this tool, they would be unable to get their wants and needs known in a medical setting or an emergency, or to call to get help from another room. And that doesn't have to be a medical provider. That could be a caregiver or a parent. But just stress what they would not be able to do if they didn't have that tool. Hopefully that answers your question. Please email me if you have any more.
I don't see any more questions at this time, so I think we will end the webinar.
Thank you all.